I here for? I'm here to talk about a freedom and liberty that is just simply obscene. So do you know that 93% of Americans right now at this hour, from New York to California, can walk into a grocery store and buy full-strength, good quality beer or a bottle of wine, whether it's local, domestic, or an international beer or wine, from their local grocery store today. 93% of Americans can do it. But for some reason, we in Colorado think we're special. We think we're freedom-loving, interesting people that are somehow protecting small businesses somehow, or somehow we're protecting small breweries because we're prohibiting the free market and competition. We're prohibiting capitalism, and we think we're cool and edgy. It is the stupidest thing. I heard all the marijuana stuff you guys have been chatting about. It is, no disrespect, but it is really dumb to be able to drive along Broadway or Colfax or a multitude of areas in Metro Denver and the mountains, go up there, every small town in the mountains, and be able to buy pot, but not be able to buy a glass of beer or a bottle of wine. That is crazy, folks. Yeah. This is a really simple matter. Whether you drink or don't drink, Coloradoans have to stand up and say, open the free market and give us liberty. And not just because of beer and wine. It's symbolic of how inept our government has become. Look at the existing law prior to last Friday when Governor Hickenlooper signed it into law. You know why you can't buy a bag of Cheetos or an avocado at a liquor store previous to last Friday. Well, it's stupid. But the law says that unless it goes into a drink, so that's a maraschino cherry, that's an olive, maybe celery if you're having it's got to be a vodka something, a Bloody Mary, thank you. Unless it can go into a drink, it's illegal for a liquor store to sell any type of food. I'm sorry, that's dumb. And when we have lawyers and lobbyists arguing for dumb laws, and citizens don't stand up and say, hey, listen, let's just fix this, please. And the legislatures don't go, of course, that's a dumb law. Well, then we know something's wrong with our society. If you're a liquor store owner, current to last Friday, if you're a liquor store owner and you're good, you have HR policies, you have marketing procedures, you have your system down, that's insane not to be able to open up a second liquor store. But in Colorado, you can't do that. You can only own one place. I'm trying to plant lots of seeds for you to ask questions here in a little bit. Okay, so those are two dumb aspects of the previous law. The third one I already talked about, not to be able to buy a bottle of beer and a bottle of wine in a grocery store. So let's talk about what the new law says. The new law says that if you're a grocery store, this is the power of the police state. And I don't mean to be melodramatic. Among libertarians, it's not melodramatic. But I happen to believe this is true. That if you want government to do something, the only power that government really has is the power to point a gun at an individual or a group of individuals. And the reason for it is because people generally want to do what they want to do. They're just going to do it because we're human. And when society says you shouldn't do that, somebody, whether it's a National Guardsman, which I used to be, or an active duty military, or more commonly in America, thank God, a county sheriff and their deputies, or a police chief and their policemen and women, say, no, you're going to stop that. And the way they tell you to do that, if you don't listen once or twice, is they're going to point a gun at you. And that includes fines, because most of us don't want to pay the fine. And the way they get us to pay the fine is saying, no, you're going to go to jail if you don't pay the fine. You go, but I don't want to go to jail. And they go, no, I'm sorry, you're going to go to jail. And they point a gun at you. So do we really want the power of the police state to say to a grocery store, should your customers want to buy beer or wine from your establishment, the only way you can do that is by buying at least 2 liquor stores that are within 1,500 feet of your establishment. And if there are no liquor stores within 1,500 feet of your establishment, you've got to go further and further out until you find a liquor store who's willing to sell you their liquor license. It's government putting a private contract relationship between two private businesses. Why would we want that? And by the way, I have the law here if you'd like to read it. Worse than that, that's the poison pill, by the way, in the bill that the legislature and the governor just signed. So for most of us, depending on where you live, you're going to have to wait 20 years to buy liquor from your local grocery store. Now, I'm about 3 miles away from the Safeway in Littleton. It's been selling full-strength beer, wine, and all the liquor you can imagine for about 8 years now.
So hell broke loose.
Nothing happened, except everybody that lives close to that store has the convenience and the competition of being able to buy something conveniently, a bottle of wine with their steak, or some Cheetos with their 6-pack of beer. The number one SKU at that Safeway at Middle and Broadway is the 6-pack of Colorado craft beer that you choose 6 different varieties and you put it into a 6-pack and it costs you $10. The number one SKU by far is because people like good Colorado craft beer. I do, I hope you do as well. But you may have to wait 20 years for your Safeway King Supers to do that. Why? Because that's what the governor and the legislature put in. Worse. Let's see, what's really worse? Worse. They can't buy excess product. In the law, it says each individual grocery store can only buy the beer and eventually liquor that they can keep within their store. They can't warehouse it. So who does that benefit? Doesn't benefit the consumer, because if you think about it, if you're a small brewery or a big one or a vineyard or a distillery and you've got some excess stuff and you're trying to get rid of it, you can work on some special deal with a major chain or a liquor store or whoever, and they can warehouse it. Not under the state law. You can only sell it into the individual store. And by the way, you can't sell it below cost. Why would there be the power of the police state putting into state law? Governor Hickenlooper says he wants to protect the small guy. And by the way, I like John, I really do. I've known him for a long time. But he wants to protect the small guy. Isn't the small guy us? The person who's trying to buy a 6-pack of beer or a bottle of wine? Do you know that we spend $1.80 more per 6-pack for a $10 6-pack? $1.80 more, and we have for decades in Colorado than other states. Because of the lack of competition and convenience that we have in Colorado. We're spending more, and by the way, we're going to do that for up to another 20 years. We're going to be spending 18% more for beer and wine in Colorado. Why? Well, I'm alluding to it, but it's to protect the liquor store owner. And I get it, you all. How many liquor store owners are there in the room? There's probably a couple. No libertarian liquor store owners, really?
What about dispensary owners?
There's like the whole crowd goes out.
Give me a deal. Look for a deal.
I get trying to protect the small business owner. I was a Chamber of Commerce CEO for a decade. There's nothing more noble than a small business. For folks that have started it, you realize it is brutal. There's all sorts of regulations. You're breaking the law and you didn't even know you were breaking the law. It is really hard. HR policies and marketing policies, and it goes to federal regulations, state regulations, local licensing regulations. It's crazy difficult to be a small business owner. I get it. I want you to have empathy for that small business owner, liquor store owner, that's been unprotected by the state government for now 83 years. But I want you to have more empathy for a citizen, consumer, voter, human being that's paying an artificially high price because of the lack of competition and freedom in Colorado. Okay. So I've got one, I need 98 more people. By the way, I brought Andrew, he's a friend of mine, so he doesn't even count. So how long have I spoken for? 10 minutes? Good. Q&A. Begin. Yes, sir.
Did you bring a petition with you?
I did. It's right here. I've got to watch it myself. The law says that I've got to see you sign it. So if you don't mind coming up here and signing it. Thank you for asking.
Right now?
Yeah, right now.
I got another.
Why don't you ask the question and sign? We can kill 2 birds with 1 stone.
So I'm the chair of the Libertarian Party.
Yes.
If this gets through,
Yes.
we're going to be supporting it.
Love that. Thank you kindly. So here's the deal. The Hobson's choice that King Soopers and Safeway and others have is this poison pill that the state legislature put in and the governor signed. There's no doubt they intentionally said this. This is to protect liquor store owners. And as I'm telling you, I think we should have some empathy for them. I really do. More empathy for us, but we should have some empathy for them. But to give the power of the decision point to a private business, veto power, to that liquor store owner says, I ain't selling to you, Kings or Safeway or Trader Joe's or whoever, or Walmart or Target or Walgreens, you can just go on down the path. I'm not selling. That basically means that all the consumers that within 1 to 3 to 5 to 10 miles away from that location doesn't have the opportunity to have that freedom and opportunity to buy a legal product from a legal establishment that wants to sell it because of the veto power of an individual small business that the power of the police state gave to them. Frankly, you all, I know your politics, at least some of it is libertarian. That's insane. You just really shouldn't give that power to a private business. That's what, whether you're, I'm a former Republican, that crony capitalism stuff is just as detrimental as entitlement stuff of me, I don't want to do anything, just give me something. Corporations can be just as bad as individuals can be. In some ways worse, whoever said that. It depends on the topic, probably. But yes. Yes, ma'am. Or did you have another question, sir? Oh, you're signing the petition. Thank you. Yes, ma'am, and I'll get to you, sir.
Okay, so this might be a little off topic.
No, I want it. Shoot.
Alright. So, as a libertarian, how do you feel about what I have a feeling this is eventually going to see itself through. I really do. It sounds like it's got some legs. But how do you feel about prohibition and the drinking age?
On any drinking age?
No, on the 21-year-old drinking age.
Versus 18 or any age?
Versus not having a
Yeah.
drinking age.
So I guess since this is being recorded, I should have talked a little bit of that before my preface on being a Republican, etc. This is not on behalf of the grocery stores. Okay? My parents took me to France. We grew up fairly poor, but by the time I went to high school, my dad finally started to make a little money. And they took me to France. And I remember as, I'd have to look this up for certain, but I think I was probably a 13-year-old. And to have a bottle of red wine in a small little cafe in a suburb, you can see the Eiffel Tower in the distance, as a 13-year-old to be offered wine, I felt like a young little adult. And I was with my mom and dad, and I think there is nothing wrong with that morally or ethically, clearly not legally. I guess I could have been breaking the law, but I think the law in France is if you look old enough or you're in a responsible environment, you should have it. I graduated from high school in 1984. I happen to really enjoy the 3-2 law in 1984 because 3 buddies took me down to the Pizza Hut at Broadway and Arapahoe Road, and we ordered a deep dish pizza and a pitcher of cold Coors Light. And I had my first legal beer at 18. But from 1987 and beyond, when the federal government said we're going to withhold federal highway dollars from you, Colorado and every other state, unless you go to 21, 3-2 has made no sense at all. And so the good news under this new bill, yes, you're right, capitalism and the free market is coming. Under the law, it says grocery stores will be able to sell full-strength beer 3 years from now. Not next July like our initiative says, 3 years from now. But not wine. Wine you're going to have to wait for 20 years. Why the legislature hates wine? They don't. But the markup on wine is greater, so they're protecting the liquor store owner for a longer period of time. That's the reason. Liquor, the market is great, and they're going to have 5 stores a year for the next 5 stores a year for the next every 5 years for 20 years. So 20 years from now, 19 years from now, there'll be 19 Safeways, 19 Kings, 19 Walmarts, 19 Costco's. Yeah, that's going to be free market. So the good news is the grocery store or the big box will determine which liquor stores they can buy for the cheapest amount of money, most likely.
Is it 5 chains or 5 individual stores?
5 per individual chain.
So like,
The owner, so
Safeway would be 1.
yeah, so they'll get 19 over in the next 19 years. Safeway will now instead have 1 store, they can have 19 years from now. 20 years from now, it's wide open. We'll be able, so you're right, the March of Freedom is coming 20 years from now. But isn't that crazy? Let me just answer, I'm sorry to go so long.
20 years?
Let me answer the end of the question. I proudly served the United States Army for 12 years. Both enlisted, I enlisted for the Persian Gulf War, then I became OCS and became an officer, company commander. I'm telling you, if you're a young man or woman who's willing to die for our country, you should be able to have a bottle of beer or a glass of wine. To answer your question.
That other people don't deserve that, right?
You mean 13-year-olds? No, my point is, every 18-year-old, if you're old enough to marry, buy property, die for your country, you should be able to drink.
Between 17 and 18.
I love it. I already alluded to it, that at some point, I don't think the South American, or the African, or the Eastern European, or the Western European model is worse than our model. I think if you look at our alcoholism rates, if you look at our drunk driving rates, if you look at our domestic abuse rates, I think they all show that in the United States it's higher than in countries that really have no limit on drinking at all. So my own personal preference is that we need to fair and flatten and simplify laws at every level that's conceivably possible. Now, for some of you, you're not going to like this. My oldest brother died of drug abuse. I have some resistance to drugs for some people. But does that mean we need to make blanket laws saying that thou shalt not, at the power of the police state, do something that an individual human being, the lowest level of government, should be able to do? I lean in that direction rather than draconian. And we'd all have some varying opinion between those extremes. Fair enough? Cool, thank you. Yes, sir. Justin.
What's the biggest differences between what you want, what you're pushing in November, the initiative, and what you're looking for just signed? Other than, you know about the 20 years.
Yeah.
What are the other differences?
So the grocery stores said that because they polled and they did focus groups, and I've traveled 4,500 miles across the state of Colorado in the last year. So if you want to know cool towns in Colorado, if you want to know cool breweries in Colorado, if you want to know interesting mountains and weird people in Colorado, I'm your subject matter expert because I got paid to sit there chatting with local mayors and county commissioners and business owners and sit there in a brew pub drinking their handcrafted beer. I love Colorado, I'm a native, and I got paid to really understand Colorado in the last year. And I'm telling you, consumers want to be able to buy a six-pack of beer and wine in grocery stores. They do. It's almost universal. You can talk to anybody and they go, oh, of course. It came from another state and we had it, or when we travel we did it, or it's about damn time. There are some exceptions, but it would pass by about 70%. That's what, the only thing that the grocery store said is we want to do what our customers want, is give beer and wine in grocery stores next July. If it passes in November, if we go forward and it passes in November, next July we'll be able to do that in every grocery store. The Grand Compromise says that only beer, full-strength beer, will be able to be in grocery stores, and it's going to be 3 years from now, not next July. For some reason, 3 years. No wine, and each individual owner will be able to do all liquor in 5 stores in the first 5 years. I think it's 4 in the first, and then 6 in the next 5 years, and then 7 in the next 5 years, and then 3. But it totals 19 over 20 years. But there's something like 340 Safeways, so out of the 340 Safeways in the state, 20 of them will be able to sell all liquor 20 years from now, and then it's wide open. And I'm telling you all, whether you're a libertarian or not, when government tries to prescribe how much beer and wine you can buy and what the manager is, and you can't buy, and what it has to sell for, and which ones can do what, it just doesn't make any sense at all. The law of unintended consequences is going to happen big time here, and I think you're right. The law is not going to stand consumers are going to get sick of this when they go, hey, I have to drive 8 miles to a Safeway or 9 miles to a King's, but I have to pass 6 other stores, and at some point they're going to tell their mayor and their legislator, hey, I want to buy this from my store, let's have a little liberty here, and the law will change. It won't wait, mark my words, it won't take 20 years.
Yeah.
Well, so why do we even pretend to put these BS laws in effect that makes us feel good, Madam Legislator, Mr. Legislator? We should really just have a philosophy of limited and less government and let the free market prevail.